Hello, David Spicer with a special episode of Stage Whispers Television Live, sponsored by the Association of Community Theatre and Marsh Insurance, on the very important issue of stage safety, staying safe, and keeping your audience safe. We've got a really action-packed seminar for you, looking at all sorts of interesting issues. And let me quickly bring in our guest. We've got John Bailey, who is the head of production at the Sydney Festival. John, g'day, welcome.
Hi, David.
John is super duper techo, and he produces. He oversees 90 to 100 productions in 4 weeks and keeps everybody safe. Well done. Ranging from sort of simple productions to sort of, amazing, sort of dangerous and exciting things like, bring an iceberg over Sydney Harbour. So, look forward to hearing your tips for that. We've also got Erin Grifton from SLE Worldwide, who are an insurer managing risk. Hello, Erin.
Hello, how are we?
And we've got Simon Calabrese from Marsh Insurance, who is the sponsor of this seminar, which is managing, which has a fantastic public liability insurance policy and volunteer accident cover for community theatre, which you can pick up on the website here at the bottom of the screen, and also many other insurance policies. G'day, Simon.
Hey, David. Nice plug there, mate.
Great. So let's get stuck into some stage safety. Now we've got John. In short, what you said to me was that whether you're a beginner, whether you're experienced, you've got to keep some things in mind: planning for risk, recording, and communicating. So just take us over the basics. What about planning?
Well, they are the three basics. So first thing you've got to do is take responsibility for the fact that you're going to have some risks. In whatever you do, you're going to have some risks. And so you need to plan for those risks. So when you're designing the show, when you first get to the theatre, when you're doing your bump-in week, you need to be thinking about planning those risks and identifying those risks. The second thing you need to do is record them. Set up a checklist of all the risks that you need to check each day, or a checklist of things that you need to remember to tell people. And then the final thing is to communicate. Now, you might be communicating the checklist of your planned risks, but you might also be communicating some risks that have come up on the day, either during your bump in or when the show is about to start. Something may have changed and you need to communicate. So it's very important to be talking to people.
Well, let's have a look at some stages. This is one of the productions that was staged at the Sydney Festival. What are the dangers that you can see in this image?
So this is a rehearsal situation. You're going to be bringing a cast into this stage, and the microphone is there just temporarily. It's not going to be part of the show. If it was part of the show, that cable that you can see to the left of the photo would be taped down. But in this situation, there's a good example of saying to people, hey, there's a cable, just watch out for the cable. Now, people should be always looking after their own risks. You want everyone in the company to be keeping an eye out for problems and putting their hand up about risks. But when they first come into a space, particularly, they're thinking about other things. You need to make them aware. Other things worth mentioning here is these are all loose chairs. Those chairs that you can see in that earlier image are loose chairs. And you should always tape those together, cable tie them, Velcro them together in groups of at least 4 in case your audience have to leave in a hurry.
Now, what? This is another bump in with dangers.
And another bump in with risk. All bump ins have risks because it's kind of temporary activity. It's often about building, and that means you're getting up ladders, you're using tools and machinery, and also the people that are on stage may not be necessarily aware of the live edge, which is the thing that you can see to the right of the picture. Now, see that orange line? That is actually the top of a fence that the Sydney Theatre Company puts up at the Sydney Theatre so that the live edge of the stage has got some protection. If you actually step off, you'll see it, but if you step off, you've got something to grab onto. And that's worth doing, even if you just run a line across a stage that you're using when you're bumping in. It's a good thing to do.
Now, what are they doing right here, and what could they be doing better in this picture?
Well, nowadays, certainly at the Sydney Festival, we require everybody to wear high-vis vests, whether they're inside or whether they're outside. This is a good example of them not wearing high-vis vests inside. As you can see, everything's black, and the people aren't really that visible, particularly the person you can see behind that truss work there to the right. They're very cheap. They're like $3 at Bunnings, I think, and it's worth putting them on to everybody because it just reminds everyone the situation that they're in.
Well, let's bring in Erin from SLE. Now, Erin, you've got welcome again. You're watching Stage Whispers Television Live. We're doing a special stage safety seminar sponsored by Community Theatre, www.communitytheatre.com.au and Marsh Insurance and their public liability policy. Now, Erin, you've got a neat little summary of risks which people should particularly take note of. Let's go through them.
Yes, thank
Oh,
you.
no, wrong one. Here we go. This is the correct one.
There we are.
Yeah.
There are a number of risks that we always need to turn our mind towards, and those risks can lead to personal injuries or property damage. Now, some of these things that we need to turn our mind toward is things on the ground that can cause slips, trips, and falls. They can be spilled drinks, food, there could be a water leak, there could be wet floors. As we saw before, there could be wires that could be tripped over, or even props that are put into the thoroughfare and people can stub their toe on that and fall over. Ideally, to have steps lit and their contrasting edges and handrails in place. These are some of the things that lead to the most common types of personal injury claims that we see. And a lot of them can be avoided or at least mitigated. And as the old saying goes, don't just have one person to be a safety officer. These risks, but to also have many eyes on it. So if everyone is watching and everyone is looking, they'll be able to identify these things.
So John,
yep.
is that critical, John, to have somebody in charge, but to record the risks up front, and then also everyone to take responsibility for the issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to have. It is important to have one person who does that planning and who's the person who will be looking. So that there's one person who is, going to be looking, but also exactly as Erin says, you need everybody to be watching out for risk. You need everybody to be taking some responsibility for their safety. That's what the toolbox talk is about. That first thing in the day where you get everyone together and you get them to talk about what the risks are that they may be dealing with today. And more importantly, just what we're doing today. Here's what we're going to do. And then everyone is on the same page about what's going to happen.
Okay. We've just walked onto this set we're seeing now. What's going to be the basics that the head of safety should be orienting people with this particular set we're looking at now?
I put this in. This is Canning and Cracking, which is a show we did with Belvoir Street Theatre. And we did it inside a heritage building, which is Sydney Town Hall. And that's just to say that some of the risks, sure, there are plenty of personal safety risks, but also some of the risks can be financial. And if you're inside an historic building, you also need to be watching for what is it that building would be expecting. How would they expect you to behave when you're bringing your show into that building to ensure that you don't end up racking up a big repair bill.
Here's another production. Talk us through this particular set and the challenges it posed.
So this show's Manifesto. We did it in Bay 17 at Carriageworks this year, just gone. Fantastic show. It's a good example of the designer saying, I want a lovely clean line of all of my lovely pink curtains at the back of the set. But as you can see, those platforms are quite high. And on each one of those platforms, there was a drum kit. There were 9 drum kits in all. So drummers sitting behind drum kits playing the drums. Of course, when they get up from their drums, they're going to sort of step backwards. And the chance that they could step backwards off it and go straight off the back of that platform was a risk that we couldn't accept. But the designer still wants their lovely, clean curtains running all the way to the ground. So we had, you can see behind, freestanding handrails that we designed and made that would give the artist something to lean against should they step backwards or fall backwards off the platform.
Now, this one is even more challenging. Tell us about the wondrous risks of these fish tanks.
So this was a show called Aquasonic in 2015, if I'm not wrong. Again, we're in Bay 17. There's a couple of risks here. Of course, there's the obvious risk of people being able to breathe underwater and not being able to breathe underwater. They didn't use any form of aqualung or anything. They literally were just putting their head above the water. But the other risk was that we had to keep the water to a temperature that was comfortable, because hypothermia can really be a thing, particularly in an air-conditioned space. And then the other thing, again, was about flooding the space. Like, what are we going to do about not flooding the space? And you can see, well, you can just see that actually what we've done is we've laid pool liner over the entire space and put a little edge to it all so that we can catch any water that might splash out of the tanks.
It went okay. You had no problems with that?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Okay, let's have another look at another interesting production. Tell us about this one.
So this is the room, which is we did this year at the Rosenpacker Theatre. It was a French company, and they're a circus company. And unlike many performance companies and many work environments, they have a very high tolerance to injury. They're expecting injury. I guess like athletes, football players or similar, they're expecting that at some point somebody will be injured, and they're expecting that that could happen during the show. And so they have a process for keeping the show going and for changing the show on the fly if a person is actually injured. It's actually quite complex. It's a remarkable thing, and I'd never seen anything quite like it before. And that was how they manage their risks. So they manage their risks in a very different way, but it is not the way that I'd recommend most companies to manage their risk if they had an injury during a show.
Goodness me! Well, we don't want to, we don't encourage people to budget for injuries. So, but Erin, let's actually talk about that issue of what to do when there is an accident. What there is a protocol about. I mean, first of all, John, you've told me before, the show doesn't have to go on. That's an important message you want to get across. That that in certain circumstances, stop the show.
Absolutely, stop the show. And we all learnt that. The most professional companies has learnt that during the pandemic, because we all cancelled a lot of shows. But also, you do often need to stop a show, not just for the people that are on stage, but also if you have an incident in the audience.
And you encourage rehearsing a show stop for every
I
production
do.
before they go
do.
on. We're going to rehearse a show stop.
Yes. So we rehearse a show stop with any performance that we do at the festival, and it just involves a person on stage or even a person front of house putting their hand up and yelling, "Stop, please." And just those two words, and that's called a show stop. And then the stage manager then would normally take over the situation that's going on, would come out. They should have a pre-prepared speech to talk to the audience about, to say, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had to stop the show. We're just finding out what's going on, and we'll come back to you soon." And then either the show will restart again, or that you may have to send the audience home. And you should have an announcement for both of those options as well.
Now, Erin, you prepared this. I'll just put this graphic up. What to do after an incident. There are certain protocols that you should follow. Obviously, do you want to talk us through it?
Yes, of course. So the basics would first apply. Give first aid. Make sure that the area is safe. But subsequent to that, for the purposes of trying to gather information, the most important thing you can do is keep it factual and paint a picture of what's happened. So take photos. You can take witness statements if you like, have preserved CCTV footage. Most importantly, you can sympathize and you can say sorry. You can apologize for what's happened. And that's not an admission of liability. But having said that, do not specifically admit liability, because there might be a number of other factors at play where it could be a contractor or a subcontractor that might have caused it. Perhaps there is a defense under the Civil Liabilities Act. And so as much as a human being wants to apologize and say, "Yep, we're so sorry, and we'll make sure we make this right for you and pay for it," that next step is what makes an insurer's life far more difficult. So what do we want? We want an objective and factual view of what has happened. So those photos, that CCTV, those statements, and you can put it into a lovely incident report and provide it to us. But when you're writing down the details in an incident report, make sure it is objective and it doesn't include your opinion. So to give an example, I had an incident report that, and please, forgive me, but it's the incident report stated, this is a clear case of Oscar Pistorius. We don't have a leg to stand on. Now, that doesn't necessarily pass the grandma test or something you'd want to put before a judge. So always remember what you write down as, something you might find it to be funny or something that might only be internal. This is something that is a document that is discoverable and can go before a judge and can be read by that judge. So we must always be mindful of that.
Thanks, Aaron. And I've just brought back on the screen Simon Calabrese from Marsh Insurance, who's been working with the Association of Community Theatre for 20 years on terrific public liability and volunteer accident cover policy. And it will go, and of course, you can access that at communitytheatre.com.au, which is going across the bottom of the page at the moment. And we'll talk a little bit of detail about that, but shortly. But first of all, you've got a case study of a particular accident, which we should all discuss and go through. This was a patron attended a production. They slipped down the stairs while walking to their allocated seat. They suffered a fractured collarbone, and it was discovered that the patron had slipped on plastic packaging left on the stairs by the crew while setting up for the production. And the insurer was found liable for the incident, as it was foreseeable that plastic packaging could be a slip hazard. And wait for this, what was the bill? $165,000 plus legal costs of $65,000. That's a very, very expensive piece of plastic. So Simon from the Marsh Insurance. So it just goes to show that the simplest thing to look for, prevention is the simplest thing could cause terrible injury.
Certainly, I'd probably talk more to Aaron again, his last point there. In the event of a claim, I've been servicing the entertainment industry for over 20 years, and it's, when things happen at a production, it's not normally 9 to 5 office hours, and I encourage all of our clients to call. They've got access to mobile numbers of myself and the broader team. That's where we can provide advice there in real time where it might be required, and assist in what to do next, perhaps with the team there on site, but then also have conversations with your insurers to assist along the way. There might be special benefits from the policy that can be accessed immediately if need be to help mitigate any further loss. So I'd always encourage a conversation with your insurance advisor, your broker, immediately when the claim is happening, if it's needed, so that way we can provide further advice and help you along the way.
Okay, and John, you're back live, John. And so I just this is a special Stage Risk with television broadcast on Stage Safety. We're speaking to John Bailey, head of production of the Sydney Festival, Erin Griffin from SLE Worldwide Risk, and Simon Calabrese from Marsh Insurance. So just some simple things. Signs. How important are signs, John?
This is a funny photo, obviously, that someone set up backstage. But signs are very important, and people often get bored of having to have them printed up. And you should have them printed up. Handwritten signs, people often find it difficult to read them. So we have these terrific signs which are Velcroed. So we put up a board that can accept Velcro, and then we literally just mix and match these signs, and we literally just printed up boxes of them. It's a nice, simple way to put up all of the warnings that you need to put up at the entry to the show.
Right, and also we've got an outdoor production here. Talk us through the special risks of an outdoor production.
Well, the special risk in this outdoor production is actually our neighbour in the background, which is St Mary's Cathedral. So we were on St Mary's Cathedral forecourt for this show that we set up the year before last. And while we didn't amend the acts particularly to make sure that St Mary's was happy perhaps with what the act was doing or what the act was saying, what we did do though was have a lot of conversation with them around our hours of operation and the kinds of things that we would do at various times around funerals, etc. So that's another risk Another risk is that to your show might be that you get shut down because you're not a good neighbour, basically. And so that is about being a good neighbour.
Now, I couldn't resist. We put this up at the beginning. What on earth? What sort of show is this with an iceberg suspended from a crane on Sydney Harbour?
Yes, so this was a physical theatre work. It also had a ecological message, and it's on a crane, a tower crane, on the forecourt of the Sydney Opera House, and it is hanging over Sydney Harbour. And there's kind of two things that I wanted to point out here. Is that firstly, you can make a show safe. You just have to think it out. And the second thing is to say that hope is never a strategy. So saying, "Oh, I hope it doesn't rain," or I hope that this trick works the way we expect it to. You always have to be looking for solutions and looking for the way that things may go wrong. But yeah, this one was 6 months of risk assessing and talking to a lot of different people before we were able to do it.
Right. Okay. Well, let's just recap what are the main points that we need that we want to impress upon people. I'll bring us all back on screen now. We're all back on screen. Let's just summarize and wrap up this session. So it's about planning, about somebody being in charge and to writing down and recording the risks. So how important is it that you're able to show that you've written down, you've got a record that you took, that you had a look at it and you told everybody about it? How important is that, Erin?
It is very important to show and demonstrate that you've taken reasonable measures. Okay, what is a reasonable measure? Here is my documentation. Here are my procedures. This is my actions on for this type of incident, and this is what we can do to mitigate it. If you don't have that, then you have a lot less of a defense if something does happen.
Now, you spoke about this concept of toolbox talk, John. What did you mean by that?
The toolbox talk is ensuring that everybody on stage understands what they're doing in that particular day and understand the risks that are around them. Again, if something happens, it makes it much harder for someone to say, "Well, I had no idea." But also, you're keeping people safe by that simple, very quick meeting, 5 minutes maybe.
5 minutes. And it should be before when you bump in, or it should be at rehearsals, or it should be refreshed. How often should you be doing that safety check?
Well, we do it every day. So it's called different things. Toolbox talk generally is about the bump in and the bump out. It's for a crew. But we also call it briefing, and we'll do that often for the front of house and also for the cast each night. Each night.
Fantastic. And the show doesn't have to go on. How many shows? How often are shows paused because of safety concerns?
Well, I would have, interestingly, since the pandemic, I feel like it happens more often, but we would have a minimum of 2 or 3 show stops in a festival year. Complete show cancellations are pretty rare, but show stops are relatively common.
And Simon and Erin, how good are are actors and crews at keeping people safe? Are there any trends? I mean, is it we've had this disruption of COVID, but do you get any statistics about the sort of claims becoming more intense or less intense?
I mean, if I speak to from my perspective, and then we're not just talking about the last 4 or 5 years, but the last 20 years, there's a piece that in many instances where people think the entertainment industry, because it's all these moving parts, is very risky. But what I see, and I'm sure Erin can vouch for the same, is that the people that are organising these theatre productions and big shows, they're probably one of the they probably tick all the boxes from a risk management perspective more than many other businesses do. And if claims anything to go by, from sort of from a local perspective, the claims aren't representative of a high risk situation in relation to the premium that's being paid. So for me, we see a lot of submissions daily come through, and from the smallest operators to the largest ones, many of them are very well aware of risk management requirements and surveys and safety checks, and that's been my experience now for 20 years working with the entertainment and theatre industry.
Yep, and just on the back of that, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. As every industry is getting safer and safer, there's greater awareness over what needs to be done and a proactivity to make sure that we do that. Having said that, though, there are still more claims, and the payouts on those claims get higher and higher as more people are connected through social media and through online forums, and are more aware that they have a legal right, or at least to give it a crack to see whether they can get some money, and go and see a lawyer to make a submission, make a claim, and see what they can get out of it. So as safe as everything is getting, we still see more and more claims as more people talk about this thing.
And what about, John, tell us about your safety record at the Sydney Festival.
Our record's very good, David, I have to say, and it has got better over the years. We do incident reports when incidents do occur, and then at the end of each festival, we then review how we scored this year. But there's one little tip I will give, particularly if you have a patron who might be injured in the course of a show. And I always say exactly as Erin said earlier, we don't admit liability, but we're sorry for the person, we look after the person, we organise a cab for them home, we follow up the following day, and it will be the person that took charge of talking to them, whether it's a front of house manager or it might be the event coordinator. That person will ring them up the next day and say, hi, it's John, and how are you? Is everything okay? And that really often heads off a much bigger claim.
Okay, that brings the satellite dish is about to run out after half an hour. So where can people get more resources? Where can they get a checklist, a sort of a standardized checklist in writing? John?
Standardized checklists, there is so much on the web that you can look up. There are tutorials, there is paperwork, there are literally plenty of things that you can plug into to make your workplace safer.
Right. And if you'd like, of course, to hear about the Association of Community Theatres Public Liability and Volunteer Accident Cover, you can go to www.communitytheatre.com.au and click on insurance, and it'll take you straight through to that policy. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for that special edition of Stage Whispers TV Live on stage safety. We've covered a lot, and we hope that it makes everyone's time in the theatre safer, and we can all lower costs and lower risk.
Thanks for having me.